The Russian dictator Vladimir Putin allegedly made an agreement with Donald Trump back in Alaska that Russia would not interfere with the United States of America capturing the Venezuelan dictator Maduro. And in exchange, the United States allegedly gives up Ukraine to Russia and recognizes that it is Moscow's sphere of influence. This is the kind of material that Reuters published the other day, and the publication writes that despite Putin's defeat in Venezuela, Moscow is eagerly awaiting potential benefits from President Donald Trump dividing the world into spheres of influence. But here, some puzzle pieces quickly fit together. Because today, that very Donald Trump publicly stated that the new president of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, should declare a complete oil embargo against all opponents of the United States, including Russia. In addition, Trump called for the urgent removal of Russian agents from Venezuela. United States Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth publicly mocked the Russian air defense system for failing during Maduro's capture. And the United States State Department directly states that the Western Hemisphere is an exclusive zone of United States influence. Trump announces that the United States is returning to the Monroe Doctrine, which the Russians are relying on. Trump is prepared to divide the world with Vladimir Putin, similar to how Europe and the United States did in the 19th century. But let's analyze all the pros and cons of the theory that Putin and Trump allegedly agreed to trade Ukraine and Venezuela. My name is Alexei Pichi. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like this episode, and leave any comment under this video. It really helps a lot in promoting content on YouTube. I would appreciate your comments, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel, Peachy News. The link is in the description of this video. There we post breaking news as it comes in. So, Reuters reports that supposedly Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump might have agreed to divide the world. And the fact that Moscow is not reacting in any way to the capture of Venezuelan leader Maduro is direct proof of that. Supposedly, now Putin expects that Trump also won't interfere in Russia's war against Ukraine. The agency reminds that United States Special Forces captured Maduro just 8 months after the Russian president agreed on a strategic partnership with Venezuela. Trump said that the United States is temporarily taking control of Venezuela, which has the world's largest oil reserves. Some Russian nationalists criticized the loss of an ally and contrasted the swift United States operation with Russia's inability to take control of Ukraine in almost 4 years of just the full-scale phase of the war. And now I'll quote Reuters on another level. Russia sees what Trump calls piracy and regime change in the United States' backyard as more acceptable for Moscow, especially if Washington becomes mired in Venezuela. A high-ranking Russian source said that if this is an example of Trump's Monroe Doctrine in action, then Russia also has its own sphere of influence. The source was referring to the Trump administration's desire to restore United States dominance in the Western Hemisphere and revive the 19th century Monroe Doctrine, which declared this area a zone of Washington's influence. And here I would note that Putin is trying to assert a Russian sphere of influence in the former Soviet republics, in Central Asia, the Caucasus, and Ukraine, something Washington has opposed since the end of the Cold War. Putin hasn't publicly addressed the United States operation in Venezuela, though Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs urged Trump to drop the Monroe Doctrine and begin talks. And moving on, suddenly the article features a quote from Russian propagandist Sergei Markov, who says, and I quote, "Trump's theft of another country's president proves international law is meaningless and only power matters, something Russia has long understood. The modern Monroe Doctrine can be interpreted in different ways." Are the United States really ready to recognize Russia's dominance over the former Soviet Union, or is it just that the United States is so strong that it will not tolerate any great powers even close to them? Later in the article, a quote appears. That's essentially what the Reuters insider report claimed, that Putin and Trump had agreed on something, but in reality there was no insider information. For Putin and Xi Jinping, the fact that the United States president focused on the Western Hemisphere and potentially got bogged down in that very Western Hemisphere seemed more than acceptable. Given that Russia is focused on Ukraine and China on Taiwan, but if the issue were only in the Western Hemisphere, it's obvious that the Russians have long considered the entire post-Soviet Union their sphere of interest. And I'll remind you that back in November-December 2021, before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Moscow directly and publicly demanded that NATO return to the 1997 borders, meaning to withdraw from the territory of the post-Soviet Union. But since then, NATO has only grown, and over the past year, Russia has suffered 4 geopolitical defeats at once. Syria is clear, the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime, the deal between Azerbaijan and Armenia, something Moscow couldn't achieve for a long time, the Gaza Strip, and a weakened Iran. And now Venezuela. That's why the Kremlin needs to tell Russians something, so they think that this was all part of the plan. In Venezuela, Maduro's regime didn't fall because the Russians were toothless and couldn't help him, but because the great geostrategist Vladimir Putin had already made some kind of deal with Trump. In reality, there was no behind-the-scenes deal between the two superpowers to trade the post-Soviet space for the Western Hemisphere. In fact, America doesn't need to give anything to Russia in exchange for the Western Hemisphere. Moreover, America didn't even ask Russia. And Trump publicly stated directly that he doesn't care about Vladimir Putin's opinion on Venezuela. And when he gave the order to capture Maduro, he didn't discuss this issue with Putin. If you don't believe it, listen to the press again. Yesterday, a press conference by Donald Trump on board the presidential plane, literally the day before yesterday. Besides, Pete Hegseth openly mocked the Russian air defense in Venezuela yesterday, which didn't work. He claims 200 of our soldiers entered the country, captured the president, extracted him, and Russian air defense did nothing in response. Today, Trump issued several demands to Venezuela's interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, and said he is ready to send troops if she does not cooperate with the United States. The main demand from Washington is tougher measures to combat drug trafficking, the complete expulsion of agents from countries or networks hostile to the United States, and the cessation of oil sales to United States adversaries. The United States also urged Rodriguez, sworn in after American special forces captured Nicolas Maduro, to free Americans from Venezuelan prisons. And here it's worth explaining a couple of important points. The day before, United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio directly stated that Venezuela should not be an operational center, and today Trump is already calling on the new president of Venezuela to drive all Russian agent networks out of the country. Not just there, the Cubans, Chinese, Iranians, and Cubans supporting Maduro's regime must also leave this country. That is, Trump directly stated that there should be no Russians or any structures connected with them in Venezuela. And this is important for Ukraine as well, because drones for the Russians were being mass-produced in Venezuela, but I will talk about this in a separate episode. So if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe to the channel. In addition, Venezuela must stop trading oil with those same Russians. Russia bought oil from Venezuela, resold it under the Rosneft brand, and profited from it, so don't be surprised. Also, according to sources from the Financial Times, United States officials expect that the new head of Venezuela will help facilitate free elections in the country and then step down. Such demands, aimed at strengthening relations between the two countries, were previously rejected by Nicolas Maduro, but now the new president seems to be agreeing to them. And let me remind you that on Monday, Trump said in an interview with national broadcasting company News that if Rodriguez stops cooperating with American officials, he may send troops to Venezuela. This comment echoes a statement made by Trump on Sunday when he said, quote, "If they don't behave properly, we will carry out a second strike." There you go. In the conversation, Trump clarified that he does not currently consider military intervention necessary and did not insist that the United States is now at war with Venezuela. Quote from Trump, "We are at war with those who traffic drugs. We are at war with those who release their prisoners from jail into our country, and their drug addicts and their patients from psychiatric hospitals into our country." On Sunday, Venezuela's new president Rodriguez urged Washington to reconcile and cooperate, saying the new government invites the United States. A quote about joint work on a cooperation program aimed at common development within the framework of international law and at strengthening lasting coexistence in the community. Let me also remind you that the day before, a trial began in the Manhattan Federal Court against Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores. The United States accuses the ousted president of narco-terrorism, conspiracy to import cocaine, and possession of machine guns and explosive devices. Both defendants denied their charges. The next hearing is scheduled for March 17. So basically, if you look at the big picture of what's happening, all the rumors that Putin and Trump supposedly made a deal, well, in my opinion, that's complete nonsense. And what do you think? Write in the comments, do you think it's a setup or not? I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you found this episode useful and the information was interesting for you, you can support the work of this YouTube channel financially with any donation or subscription using the links and details provided. In the description of this video it says, support the Alexei Pechi channel. Choose any format that's convenient for you. I will be grateful for any support from you. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.